feel like I'm singing karaoke. Don't worry, I won't. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. There we go. Wow.
Thank you.
Kind of wake up the room here. I feel like I should get you up to do calisthenics or something. So, how many people here have failed at something? Okay, so the rest of you didn't have your hands up. You're lying to me. That's not a good way to start our day.
Did you come to this conference just to bask?
Yeah, or gloat. They came to gloat.
Yeah, exactly.
Liars! Liars. So we're going to talk this morning, well, we're going to talk about failure. That's what we're going to do this morning. So Gina is one of my favorite people in Silicon Valley. She's a woman who I think represents a great role of leadership, I think, to women in Silicon Valley. To men too, don't worry guys, you get that too. But let's start really carrying over the themes from this morning. The theme that Chip started, talking about the emotional side of business. Let's talk a little bit about your experience as in leadership, and maybe as you've learned in leadership, about staying connected on that level, both with the people who you're working with and the people who are working for you.
You mean on an emotional level?
No.
It's important. In all seriousness, I think one of the best things someone said to me once, and I think it's pretty well acknowledged, which is you can tell the product, the team that built the product, and you can look at the product and understand the team dynamics as well. And that basically those two things are so interconnected, especially in the world we live in terms of building software and building digital products. And I think that as a result of that, the thing that you have almost more control over is the team that you're putting together, the team dynamics that you're putting together, how you address things that come up on the team. And that gets reflected in a number of different ways in terms of business advantage, whether that's how fast you can move, the kinds of insights that you can have, whether you live on a team and work on a team with rigorous debates, whether or not you're able to bring to life a new product and then continue to iterate it because you're willing to talk about what's right about it, but also probably more importantly what's wrong about it. And I think that you can't look at the structure that you put together as a team from the it, if you will, the we, which is the interpersonal dynamics people have, and then also what are the individual motivations of everybody who's on your team. I feel like this is perhaps more general, but I think it's a really important place to sort of start in terms of where are issues going to arise, but also where the opportunities are. And for the world of creating software, I think it starts and it stops with the team.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before the session about, from the product perspective, how especially in the realm of social media today, where you'll launch a product, there will be like, oh, I love it, or lots of likes on the page, but the feedback isn't necessarily constructive, which means you don't actually get to fail in that cycle. No product as it launches is perfect. Maybe you can share a little bit of your perspective of, from the product development perspective, the lessons that you've learned about what kind of feedback you should be taking from people as you're starting to build something.
Because we live in such an interconnected world, nobody wants to actually come out and say, ugh, I don't really get what you're doing. Because you probably also have a product or are working on a team with a product, and you don't necessarily want somebody to say that to you. And so we get into this, especially when you look at online. If you look at any day that a new product launches, which is pretty much every day, you see just this thread of, congratulations, such an awesome job. And it's almost actually, once you get through that cycle, that you start to understand what's real about what you've built and what's not real about what you've built. And the good news is that you get, you can accelerate that cycle in a couple of probably pretty important ways. But for example, we put out a new version of the Mightybell product in June, and we didn't talk about it. And the reason we didn't go out and talk to 14 different people about it and make a big deal is because from my perspective, it wasn't going to be helpful to us to get that, oh my God, congratulations, this is amazing, it's so awesome. I actually wanted to see what the numbers were that that would happen when someone just came, not because they knew, anybody on the team, or, it was my mom or whomever.
The people who have to like it.
The people who have to like it, but instead actually stay focused on how people are actually using a product. Because I think that the rest can be very noisy and very confusing, because you're like, oh my God, I showed this to this person, they totally love it, like this is going to change the world, and then you're sitting there and it's like crickets, with the actual numbers themselves. And so, at least from our perspective, we found it to be actually even more important to undersell what we're doing and to just really stay focused on what are the actual quantitative numbers that we're generating with our product and how can we improve those, and then going out for press and social media and all this other stuff once it's very clear that all the pieces are in place. I think there's been some recent examples of trying to do the Big Bang launch, and
Can you cite one in particular?
I'm sure there's a few. They typically involve a large dollar amount associated with the fundraising process and a very early stage product.
That's maybe not real yet.
That might not be real yet. And I just don't think, I think that's actually setting people up for like the big failure without a lot of, if you look at it, that's never really worked. So, not to mention the fact you look like an asshole. So you look like an asshole and it doesn't work, which doesn't sort of seem like a great way of launching, new products. Because, what we do, one of the things that's been so important to me is looking myself in the mirror and saying, am I prepared to publicly fail? Am I prepared, and am I okay? Do I care enough about what I'm doing to sit up here in front of you guys and say, that was a total dog? And the answer is yes. Because I don't believe that you can actually build anything new and do anything that interesting if you're not willing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm willing to put myself out there, I'm willing to be vulnerable, I'm willing to have haters, I'm willing to be, called every name in the book. I'm willing to do this because I think what I'm doing, what my mission is so important that it's worth it to me no matter what happens.
So there were some haters who came after you at one point after a
which time?
A fairly well-known cover photo of you on a magazine. There were some people who gave you a hard time. Did anyone ever you see the cover of Gina?
There were like two people, and one of them was Owen Thomas at Valleywag, who was like something about my boobs. And everybody else was pretty cool about it.
It was a Fast Company cover. It's it was their second best-selling cover that year, next to only Steve Jobs. So not such bad company. But Gina's in this awesome kind of like wife-beater t-shirt, and she looks badass. It's an awesome picture. But there were some people who commented, you're using your femininity, you're using, the female card in an inappropriate manner, but that wasn't what it was about. You were able to really step up and be okay with it. And the article was really quite flattering.
Yes.
Just giving me nothing. So what? But in terms of, for the female entrepreneurs,
I've seen people get a lot more shit than I got for that. So, the message is very clear. It's certainly women in Silicon Valley, which is, put your head down and just keep delivering, because we don't want any of that other stuff.
So what would you say to the female entrepreneurs in the room about that?
Don't listen to them.
So when we were preparing to talk today, we were talking a little bit about what failures look like, and you had a very interesting perspective that it's not about those colossal failures, it's about the small failures. So I want to start with, what is the first failure that of which you have a cognitive memory that you really learned something big from?
When I was in 3rd grade, I was a competitive race walker, which is so weird, I know. I was at Cupertino Yearlings, it was our track team, and my godfather was an Olympic race walker, so I was a race walker, and I was getting ready for this big state meet. And I got there late. my mom was late. I was in 3rd grade, so I was not driving yet. And my mom was late, and I got there and I missed my race. And it was totally crushing because obviously I wanted to race and I wanted to do really well. And you know, it's certainly one of those moments and one of those times, and I think that this has actually been a thread starting very early, which is, you know, I could have actually been a victim at that moment. You know, my mom got me there late, feeling sorry for myself, and I didn't. Like, that just wasn't my MO. And when I think about any number of things that happened to any of us sitting in this room, and certainly happened in my life, whether it was, you know, my dad being killed when I was 11, or whether it was, you know, not winning vice president of my high school. I know these things matter. It's not about what happens to you, it's what you do about it. It's what is that next step? How do you respond from failure? How do you respond from disappointments? And that's really where, for me, I stay very focused, and I can't say I've always been very good at this, but try to stay focused on the things I can control, and to look at life as a series of small moments that I have some control over my contribution to those moments. So, you know, anything I've looked at that are, you know, public failures of my own or other people, you can typically trace them back to teams ignoring the viewpoint of the person that continues to make the same point over and over again, that, you know, the rings are broken. And basically the teams start to ignore that person. You can trace so much of the big colossal failures back to decisions that were made in small moments. And that's where I look at every week as like, what did I learn this week? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? How can I take into next week what I learned in this one? And I spend a lot less time, as I've gotten older, trying to do things that are towards some external result that I value the external result more than, did I do everything I possibly can do in this situation to drive the right results or the things that I believe in? And I have to say, it's so much more relaxing and so much more fun, and I find myself actually working harder in a more engaged way, because it doesn't feel like there's this big scary world out there that's like coming crashing down on me. Not like I was ever that operated against that kind of reality for myself, but certainly the more I feel like I am in control of my own destiny, and that failure and mistakes and fucking up, are we allowed to say that here?
Just did.
Okay. Is a part of that process, and that it is a process, I have found that it is so much more fun to fail. And it is so much more fun to succeed, because I care a lot less. The joy is in learning every single week. And I know that that sounds like such a terrible cliche, as if I live this like great life in Palo Alto. And it's pretty cool because that's what I'm focused on.
I also want to make sure, we're not going to do questions just at the end. We want to make this interactive. So if you've got a question now, get your hand up in the air. Can we have a microphone around? Did you have a question, Cassie, or you got it? Oh, excellent. Like, or you're just saying hello.
I'll shout it because I'm really loud. So you mentioned trying to find the small moments. Do you have any tips on how I can help identify what those are? Like, I feel like I'm working on doing that and I'm struggling. Are there ways to be like, oh, there's one right there?
One of the things I've started to do recently, probably in the last 6 months, and I have found it to be kind of dorky, but kind of awesome, is on Sundays, I try to take a couple hours to just write down on a piece of paper what I learned in the previous week. And looking at it from the perspective of, okay, what did I learn? And that can be the good, the bad. It's typically the bad. As you know, every overachiever in this room, and we wouldn't be here today if we weren't overachievers. Like, the slackers are at home right now. They are, you know, you're sitting there and you're constantly reacting to things, and you're, you know, just being able to proactively think on a Sunday afternoon about what I learned, and then write up a list for myself of what I want as my goals for the coming week. I have found it to be really effective. And it sounds so stupid and small, but that hour, those 2 hours, I just feel like it's a reset button at the end of every week going into a new week. And I really think, especially with entrepreneurship, that ability to fail quickly and in small ways and start the next day with a clean slate, this stuff is so hard that I feel like the more that we carry our failures on our back without actually writing them down and figuring out how to process them and go into the new week with a clean slate, it's like you're trying to climb Mount Everest with not just your supplies, but 50 pounds of rocks on your back. And it's rocks you don't need to be carrying along with you. But I don't know if anyone else in the room feels this way, but I sort of feel like sometimes that if I don't constantly remind myself of my shortcomings or things I've messed up, that somehow I'll forget them, or somehow I'm not being as effective as I can be, and it's exhausting. If you're carrying around all of your failures on your back, it's really tiring. And that's where I'm finding this weekly check-in with myself, whatever you want to call it, which, by the way, I did read about in a book, and I was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. And I started to do it, and it works really nicely.
So let's take that a step further. So you've got this list of things that you learned the week before, the lessons, maybe the mistakes that you made, etc. How do you then prioritize looking into the next week which ones you're going to tackle? We can't change ourselves all at once. There are some things that are probably recurring themes. How do you go about prioritizing that, and what are the steps you take?
They're all really small things, and that's the other thing. It's it makes it very manageable to look at it the prior week going into the next one. And it's typically the one I'm the most excited about. The one that I think is a true insight of, wow, if I tried this differently, or if this works in a new way, that would be really cool. So it's kind of the thing that actually gets me the most excited, that I tend to prioritize the highest.
I can't imagine this shy room. Yes?
Gina, what did you learn from Nick?
We want to record the questions, so we wouldn't stand up, please.
Gina, what did you learn from Nick?
What didn't I learn from Nick? There's really no way you can have an intense experience of running a company through hypergrowth without learning a ton of lessons. Lessons on the product side, lessons on the team side, things that you do right, things that you do wrong. One of the things that...
What about on the personal side?
Oh yeah, there's structural, there's team dynamics, and then there's certainly you as an individual. One of the things that again, I wish there was sort of a nugget here or a nugget there, or that you can summarize 5.5, 6 years of your life in one sentence, and I can't do that. If anybody else can do that, I would love to hear how you're doing it, because that's never really worked for me. But one of the things that I found the most humbling is that all the things, and Ning was a really important example of this. Many moments within Ning were a really important example of this. And then certainly, with Mightybell and even before Ning, which is all of my genius ideas, all the things at the time where I was like, I'm a genius. This is the best idea ever, were the shittiest ideas ever. And the things that were just sort of the throwaway experiments where it's okay, yeah, all right, let's try this. Or, oh fuck, we really actually have got to fix this because there's some spammers in Russia that are totally in our kitchen right now. Or just things that you do, that you kind of do because you just do them, turn out to be the best ideas ever. And so I'm very humble, and I'm very respectful of the fact that, first of all, you never know where good ideas come from. You have to actually stay, I think to be a good entrepreneur, you have to stay open to people's feedback, people's questions, people's reactions to the things that you build or the things that you believe in. And then know when to also, drive and adjust. But I do think it's really funny just how there is a strong correlation between the things that actually work and basically the exact opposite of the things. They tend to be the exact opposite of the things that I think are going to work.
let's talk a little bit about you as an entrepreneur and some of the major lessons that you've carried yourself along the way and how they've changed the way you do.
Oh, can I actually answer? Sorry. I just remembered one other thing I wanted to say. My major lesson from Ning, and the reason I'm continuing to work on intimate communities that are built around interests and passions and goals with Mightybell, is because I have never seen a more powerful driver of change, of real connection, and I have met some of the most amazing people online, and I just fundamentally enjoy it. And I did not know that before Ning. And instead, what I know now to be true is that as we look out over the next 2, 3, 5 years, the things that we're all working on, especially to the extent that they drive small groups and they drive intimate communities that have a passion for something, there is just true magic in that. And I know that that's not, oh, I totally fucked 5 things up, and I fucked a ton of stuff up. But I think it's also important to recognize the moments of, like, what are the true lessons? Like, what are the really important lessons? And for me, that the power of intimate communities to change people's lives has been the most profound lesson I have learned in the last decade.
Which dovetails with the question before. So how has that changed you and the way you approach doing business?
I think the biggest thing is to invest in the relationships of people that I can speak honestly with and who can speak honestly with me. I find that the places that I am the most comfortable investing my time and energy are in one-on-one conversations with people and with small group conversations with people. I don't spend a lot of time at conferences. I think this is a great conference. I'm not against this conference. But I'm not interested in going to conferences where everybody is like, oh, hey, how are you? Oh my God, I'm so busy. Oh my God, I'm drinking out of the fire hose of success. I mean, it's just, everything is just like, I don't even know what to do. It's so awesome. And we've all had those conversations, and it's just like, oh, this is boring. What I'm much more interested in is sitting down with a friend, an entrepreneur, an executive, people I care about, and really rolling up our sleeves and getting into an issue and figuring out how to solve it. I really love small groups of people where we're sharing different perspectives and getting to even better answers as a result of, hey, will you guys just take a look at this email? Or, God, like, this person who I'm working with is really challenging me in these different ways. Always said with that sort of level of, calm, collection, perspective.
Clearly people other than me who you talk to.
Right, exactly. But it's truly, I just don't think you can do new things without a small group of people that you can be real with.
We were talking earlier about this idea of the general management and skills around general management being kind of fundamentally broken.
Incomplete.
How are you spending your time looking at helping address that?
Yeah, so I'll admit something to you guys, which is that I have an MBA. I'm not proud of this fact. I actually am a total self-hating MBA, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but I spent 2 years of my life and a significant amount of money, and I've been in the working world for a while. And I think that the thing that's so interesting increasingly is that as more and more women enter the workforce, graduate from college, stay in the workforce, are on our teams, that are, it's about creating the conditions for creative debate, constructive conversations, solving problems together, that all of the skills that we've learned around leadership and management, communication, and even career navigation, a lot of it is built for a world where there are no chicks in it. And when you start to actually look at the research, that goes back 50, 60 years in social science about gender intelligence and gender dynamics, probably one of the most classic ones is the competence likability gap, that as men are more competent, they're perceived as more likable, and as women are more competent, they're perceived as less likable. And there are a number of these different kinds of dynamics that are at play when you bring women and men together in teams. And I have an emerging belief that winning teams going forward are going to actually pay more attention to gender intelligence and creating the conditions for both men and women to be successful on a team. And I think that those companies and those organizations and those products are going to win. So there's that.
And I love that there's hearty applause from men in the audience with that.
I mean, how many guys have been in a meeting with a woman where you give feedback and you're like, oh, this is going to be so great, I'm giving her constructive feedback, and she starts to cry. And it's not like she's wants to cry, but it happens. And then
has that ever happened to you?
No, of course not. And the high probability is that you or anybody who is a guy may not give her feedback again. And if you don't give her feedback, or if other women don't give her feedback, because we all want to be nice, she's not going to get better. And worse, the guys that are getting that feedback are going to get better. And now you've got, just in that small failure, you've got a situation where you are not maximizing the potential of the team that you've put together. And the answer is not to just stick with teams that are all dudes. Because dudes are awesome, but at the same point in time, if you look around at the products and services that are being built today, there's a lot of products being built right now for white guys in San Francisco. And white guys in San Francisco kind of have enough products right now. And I think this is better opportunity.
I mean, and there's studies that show that diversity on any team means that the product's just going to be better. Questions? Do you have a question in the back?
Yes.
Microphone is running to you. Go, go, go! Run like the wind.
This is a question that references the gender disparity. Regarding feedback, why women's feedback tends not to be as well received as men's feedback. Do you think that perhaps women are, taught explicitly and perhaps also implicitly to apologize for what they're about to say, instead of just being very direct the way that men tend to be?
I believe women are not stupid. And specifically, we know and understand how something is going to be heard. So it goes back to the likability competence gap. We're not dumb in terms of being able to sit down and say, hey, this is not working. And it's not working for these 4 reasons. That's hard to do. And it's hard to do because we know that we're going to be valued more for being likable than necessarily for giving that feedback. And we've all been in those meetings, and I challenge each and every one of us, men and women, to try to just address this one small thing, which is when a woman raises her hand in a meeting, it's like, I'm so sorry to ask this. This is probably a stupid question, and then it proceeds to not be such a stupid question. If each of us on our teams make the decision that we're going to value competency just as much as likability, and that we're going to make it something that gives everybody air cover, I believe we will have better teams. And that's what we're here for. I mean, it's like, we're not here today to bask in our failures so that we stay failing. It's about a process that we're creating and creating the conditions for success. And success, however anybody in the room wants to define it.
Question? Another question over there?
There is no more questions coming, according to the end.
I'm just kidding.
We have a question.
No, I'd actually like to hear more about what you said earlier about how the tossed off ideas are sometimes the winners as opposed to the ones you really believe in. Can you say a little bit more about maybe your perspective about why that might be?
If I knew, I would start having better genius ideas. You know, my genius ideas would start to look more like my throwaway ideas if I understood kind of why.
Do you think it has to do with expectations too? I mean, it's like anything else. When you have set an unreasonable expectation for something, it can't possibly live up to it, or it often doesn't live up to it. Whereas if your expectation is non-existent,
that very well might be. The only thing I've learned about addressing it is just to stay very open. Meet lots of people, talk to people about lots of different ideas, see what resonates, and then start to go down that path. And also, when something is working, even if it wasn't your genius idea, pay attention to it and do more of the thing that's working.
I think I was given the high sign that we have to end. Okay, we got another question over there?
Hey.
Cassie said we can.
So this is following on or tagging on that question about Ning. I know that Ning raised a fair amount of venture funding, and there's a lot of people in the room, obviously, who are at one point or another going to be going to look to talk to investors. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, from your perspective, the pros and the cons of having raised the type of money and the quantity of money that you raised, and how that may have contributed to the experience you've had with Ning.
Yeah, so just to put it out on the table, you know, we built a service exponentially growing to close to 100 million users per month by IP address by the time I left, adding 1 million new registered users every 14 days. What's interesting to me is that, you know, and ultimately after I left, sold for $150 million. There's, you know, not that many companies that achieve that kind of scale, achieve that kind of growth, and certainly achieve that kind of outcome. Now, we raised a lot of money too, so to be fair. And I think what happens when you raise a lot of money is that, you know, the good news about it is you can be aggressive, you can be ambitious. You know, in Silicon Valley, I would say, you know, we didn't really find this, but I've seen it certainly since, that people value you more by how much money you raise. That's fucked. It is. I'm sorry. Like, but that is how we have built this culture. It is about the money that you raise, in many cases, as a proxy for the value of your idea, or what you've actually built and what you've actually put together. So I guess that's one thing I've learned, is that it's fucked. By the way, I really should, there's like tweeting and various things, I should really not say that. The second thing is that companies that raise a lot of money and are growing, I think the thing that is not really talked about is what you have to do after you've raised that money to see a return on that money and to be viewed, you know, as successful, because we value so much that blog post that says, you know, you raised an $8 million Series A from so-and-so and so-and-so. I think we don't spend as much time thinking about what you actually have to do after that to see results. And the last thing is, you know, when you have a lot of money, again, it has a lot of really good pieces to it. The downside is that what tends to happen, and I've seen this across multiple companies, and we certainly experienced it at Ning, which was grow, where's your revenue? And it's like that change happens really, really fast. And you know, I think there's been a lot of public talk recently about Tumblr being in the same situation. And what happens internally to these companies is that you're so focused on growth, because that's what you've been valued on for, you know, your entire existence, that when you actually have to make that shift to revenue, it may or may not work. And so one of the things that I would say in terms of practical observations that may or may not be helpful is, as an entrepreneur, always know where you're going to make your money. You may not get to it for a little while, but at least start with experiments and know what's working and what's not working and how to think about revenue alongside growth. The perfect situation is when you can be growing exponentially and your revenue is growing alongside with you. But venture capitalists very often will counsel you to do the exact opposite. I mean, how many people in the room who have raised money or have wanted to raise money have heard directly out of a venture capitalist's mouth? And I'm sure there's venture capitalists in here who are amazing people who would never say this to an entrepreneur. But we don't care about revenue that you're generating. All we care about are growth. Yeah. So I would ignore that advice. I would look at growth, but I would also know how you're going to build a real business out of it.
And we had a last question, I think, down here in the front. Down here? Thank you, Mike. Mike with a mic. Was that planned?
Mike.